CD4. American English File, 3rd edition, Student Book 5, by Christina Latham Koenig, Clive Oxenden, and Jerry Lambert. Published in copyright Oxford University Press, 2021. 7.1.
Why is it that so many children don't seem to learn anything in school? A TV producer turned writer has come up with some very revolutionary ideas. A few years ago, TV producer John Lloyd thought up a formula for a new quiz show. The show is called QI, which stands for Quite Interesting, and which is also IQ backwards. It's a comedy quiz show hosted by actor Stephen Fry, where panelists have to answer unusual general knowledge questions, and it is perhaps surprising that it's particularly popular among 15 to 25-year-olds. Along with co-author John Mitchinson, Lloyd has since written a number of QI books, for example, the Book of General Ignorance, and these have also been incredibly successful. Lloyd's basic principle is very simple. Everything you think you know is probably wrong, and everything is interesting. The QI Book of General Ignorance, for example, poses 240 questions, all of which reveal surprising answers. So we learn, for example, that you are more likely to be killed by an asteroid than by lightning, or that Julius Caesar was not, in fact, born by cesarean section. The popularity of these books proves Lloyd's other thesis, that human beings, and children in particular, are naturally curious and have a desire to learn. And this, he believes, has several implications for education. According to Lloyd and Mitchinson, there are 2 reasons why children, in spite of being curious, tend to do badly at school. First, even the best schools can take a fascinating subject, such as electricity or classical civilization, and make it boring by turning it into facts that have to be learned by heart and then regurgitated for exams. Second, QI's popularity seems to prove that learning takes place most effectively when it's done voluntarily. The same teenagers who will happily choose to read a QI book will often sit at the back of a geography class and go to sleep, or worse still, disrupt the rest of the class.
7.2.
So how could we change our school so that children would enjoy learning? What would a QI school be like? These are Lloyd and Mitchinson's basic suggestions. The first principle is that education should be more play than work. The more learning involves things like storytelling and making things, the more interested children will become. Second, they believe that the best people to control what children learn are the children themselves. Children should be encouraged to follow their curiosity. They will end up learning to read, for example, because they want to, in order to read about something they are interested in. Third, they argue that children should also be in control of when and how they learn. The QI school would not be mandatory, so students wouldn't have to go if they didn't want to, and there would be no exams. There would only be projects or goals that children set for themselves, with the teacher helping them. So a project could be something like making a movie or building a chair. Fourth, there should never be theory without practice. You can't learn about vegetables and what kind of plants they are from books and pictures. You need to go and plant them and watch them grow. The fifth and last point Lloyd and Mitchinson make is that there's no reason why school has to stop dead at 17 or 18. The QI school would be a place where you would be able to continue learning all your life, a mini university where the young and old could continue to find out about all the things they are naturally curious about.
7.3. 1.
Did you know that America was named after a British merchant named Richard Americ?
How interesting. I'd always wondered where the name came from.
2.
Lloyd and Mitchinson think that school shouldn't be mandatory.
What a ridiculous idea. If it wasn't mandatory, no one would ever go.
7.4. Prefixes. Negative prefixes.
Immobile, immoral, impersonal, impractical,
Illegal. Illegitimate. Illiterate. Illogical.
irrational, irregular, irrelevant, irreplaceable,
Inappropriate. Incapable. Incoherent. Incompetent. Inhospitable.
unattractive, undue, uneasy, unofficial,
Disagree. Discontinue. Disembark. Dishonest. 7.5. Prefixes which add other meanings. 1. D.
Out means further, better, bigger.
2. I. Mono means one. 3. T.
Re means again.
4. L. Out means outside, not inside. 5. Q.
Ill means badly.
6. C. Multi means more than one, many. 7. E.
Miss means wrongly.
8. H. Anti means against. 9. O.
Up means higher, towards the top.
10. N. D means remove or reduce. 11. K.
Post means after.
12. M. Pre means before. 13. B.
Over means too much.
14. G. By means to, twice. 15. P.
Co means together.
16. F. Sub means below. 17. R.
Inter means between.
18. A. Under means not enough. 19. S.
Super means above average.
20. J. Auto means by yourself, by itself. 7.6.
So, could you tell us a little bit about the 4 pieces of art and explain the ideas that they are somehow communicating?
Okay, let's start with the frog. It's called Kobe Frog, and it's by the Dutch artist Florentine Hofmann, and it's an enormous, inflatable, 10 meters high object, and it was made in 2011 for a particular place, the roof of the Museum of Art in Kobe in Japan. And Kobe was the site of a very severe earthquake in 1995. And the frog is wearing a party hat, and it sits very close to the edge of the roof. The artist says that it's about enjoying life and having a flexible attitude in times of disaster. I'm not sure whether the people of Kobe would agree with that. Next, we come to the stones. This is a work called Blaenau Festiniog Circle. Blaenau Festiniog is the name of a town in Wales, and this work is by the artist Richard Long, and it was in an exhibition of his called Heaven and Earth. And what Richard Long does is that he spends months of the year walking through different landscapes, and he creates art out of the things he finds there. His main theme is the relationship between art and landscape, and here he has created a beautiful, harmonious arrangement of different local stones that he's chosen. And what he wants to do is to make people stop and look and realize how beautiful the countryside, and in this case, the stones also can be. Then we come to the cot, and this is a modern sculpture by Mona Hatoum, and it's called Incommunicado, and at first sight you might think it was a baby's cot. It doesn't look like a modern cot, but it looks as if it might be a hospital cot from, say, 50 years ago. But when you look at it a bit more closely, you notice that there's something strange about the bottom of the cot, where the support for the mattress should be, and in fact, it's a series of very sharp wires. Mona Hatoum is a Palestinian artist who was born in Beirut, but she was stranded in London after civil war broke out in Lebanon. And I think if we ask ourselves what her idea might be, well, it's a cot, and a cot is normally a protective bed for a baby, where a baby will be safe. But this cot is the opposite of that. So if you got into this cot, instead of being safe, you'd be seriously damaged or seriously injured. I think this cot is a kind of metaphor for the idea of the state, the country that should look after you, your mother country or your fatherland, but in an extreme political situation, instead of being safe or being at home, you feel threatened because of political oppression, and I think probably that's the metaphor that she's making here. Finally, there's pharmacy. This is an installation by Damien Hirst, and it occupies a whole room. If you were in an art gallery and you suddenly walked into this room, you might almost think you'd walked into a real pharmacy by accident. But if you start looking, you'll start seeing things which look strange. For example, there are 4 little stools the kind of stools you use to reach up to higher shelves, and on top of each one is a bowl with honey in it. And if you look up, suspended from the ceiling, there is a kind of machine for killing insects. And there are 4 old-fashioned apothecary bottles, which originally were in pharmacies because they were meant to represent the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, but which you wouldn't often see in a pharmacy today. So what could the idea be about here? Well, most of Hirst's works, like the work of many artists of the past, are about life and death. The honey attracts flies to come in, or other insects, but they end up zapped in the insectocutor, the killing machine. Drugs, medicines, to us, represent healing, so people might come into a pharmacy to get better, but even if you spend thousands of pounds on drugs, in the end you, like the flies, will die. But we also have the 4 bottles, which are the 4 primary colours, the tools, the materials of the artist, and I think he's also saying that art, like drugs, can cure, can heal, if not the body, then the spirit.
7.7.
Well, this is all very fascinating, but my problem is I don't think I could ever have gotten there by myself. I needed you, an expert, to explain these works of art to me, whereas if I went to a gallery to see normal paintings or sculptures, I could probably enjoy them without needing to have them explained to me. What do you think?
Well, I disagree there. I don't think you do need an expert to explain them to you, actually. In any case, with modern sculpture and installations, there's normally some interpretation on the walls, so you can read about it if you want to. But I think if you're going to go to a gallery to see modern sculpture and installations, and perhaps a lot of modern art in general, the best way is to go with someone else or with a group of people and to talk about the work, to ask each other questions about the things you see. And very often you find that by asking questions and coming up with the answers, you can get much more out of it. You know, even though it may not look like the kind of art that you're used to, you have to believe that the person who made it is an artist, or was an artist, and that they have things to say, and it's your job to find out what they might be.
Don't you think that they're making you work much harder to enjoy their works than artists did in the past?
Actually, no, I don't, because plenty of other works are just as elusive. Abstract art or sculpture. Many old master paintings where you don't actually understand the symbolism, there's always more to understand.
Okay, so then in that case, do you think artists today want to make you think? They don't just want to create something of beauty?
I think they always have done. They have ideas and feelings and they want to give form to them. And actually I think many people would find Richard Longstone's beautiful. And other people might think that Mona Hatoum's cot is beautiful. Maybe not exactly a beautiful object, but a beautiful and rich idea. Beauty can be a beautiful landscape or a portrait of a beautiful person, but I think it can also be a beautiful idea.
Thank you so much, Ghislaine, for coming in and talking to us today. I'm sure our audience will be...
7.8 1.
It doesn't look like a modern cot.
2.
It looks as if it might be a hospital cot from, say, 50 years ago.
3.
But when you look at it a bit more closely, you notice...
4.
But if you start looking, you'll start seeing things which look strange.
7.9 1. Bird.
Picture.
Sculpture.
Architecture.
Capture.
Culture.
Feature.
Furniture.
Future.
Leisure.
Measure.
Nature.
Pleasure.
Signature.
Structure.
Temperature.
Texture.
Treasure.
2. Tourist.
Allure.
Endure.
Immature.
Impure.
Obscure.
Secure.
Sure.
7.10 The Secret of the Forest. About 10 days before Christmas in 2003, Werner Spies, one of the world's preeminent experts on 20th century art, took the train from Paris to the picturesque port of Sète on the Mediterranean coast. Spies, a specialist in the works of the painter Max Ernst, was coming to look at and hopefully authenticate an Ernst painting that had been unknown to him and thus unknown to the art world until earlier that year. The painting was La Forêt, the forest, and although it was undated, Spies thought it had been painted in 1927. Ernst produced a number of forest paintings around that time. They are considered among his most important works. Spies had previously authenticated another Ernst work, Oiseau en Hiver, which was then sold for 500,000 euros. But the scientific analysis suggested that there was some doubt about La Forêt. It apparently included traces of two pigments, which had generally only been used by artists after 1945. Spies, however, preferred to trust his own judgment, and because La Forêt was not dated, he believed Ernst might have used the pigments at an early experimental stage, but he wanted to look at the painting to make sure.
The following morning, Helena Beltracchi picked up Spies and drove him to the beautiful Beltracchi estate. Helena was 45 and a striking woman, intelligent, cultured, animated, with thick blonde hair almost to her waist. Spies had already met her in Paris and knew something of her background. She was German, from near Cologne, and she had inherited an extensive collection of modern art from her grandfather, the industrialist Werner Jaegers. As Helena liked to tell the story, in the 20s and early 30s, her grandfather had been a close friend of Alfred Fleckheim, the most important modern art dealer in Germany, and had bought many paintings from him. After Hitler came to power in 1933, Fleckheim, who was Jewish, fled to London. His galleries were seized and his art collection was sold by the Nazis because the paintings were considered disreputable. But Werner Jaegers managed to hide the paintings he had bought from Fleckheim, including a number of works by Max Ernst, which Helena later inherited. She liked to show potential buyers an old black and white photograph of her grandmother, Josephine Jaegers, sitting in the family dining room in an austere black dress, strings of pearls around her neck, with some of the art collection on the wall behind her. Helena was now gradually selling these paintings, to which faded Sammlung Fleckheim collection labels were attached on the back. The Ernst painting, La Forêt, hung upstairs in the master bedroom. Taking it into the light, Spies was thrilled with what he saw, the intensity of the color, the power of the imagery. Despite the scientific analysis, Spies had no doubt he was holding a genuine, previously unknown Max Ernst in his hands. Following this authentication, a Swiss gallery owner paid Helena and her husband, Wolfgang Beltracchi, 1.7 million euros for the painting in November 2004. He quickly resold La Forêt for a small profit, and in 2006 it was exhibited at the Max Ernst Museum in Brühl, Germany, adding to its value. La Forêt was finally sold later that year for $7 million. From the early 90s onwards, many more paintings made a similar journey from the Beltracchi's lovely home to the walls of the world's top collectors and museums. There was just one little problem.
(7.11)
There was just one little problem. Every single painting that left the Beltracchi's house, including La Forêt, was a forgery. In what is believed to be the most lucrative art forgery scam in history, all these paintings were the work of Wolfgang, Helena Beltracchi's husband. Wolfgang was quite young when he realized he had a unique gift. His father was a church muralist and sometimes produced copies of 17th-century old masters to sell for small amounts of money. To his father's amazement, the teenage Wolfgang painted a Picasso in a couple of hours. He later went to art school. 3 of his paintings sold for reasonable amounts in a show in Munich in 1978. But Wolfgang was more interested in his free and easy lifestyle than in the struggle of building a career as an artist. He forged a number of paintings in the 1980s, mainly selling them through dealers in Berlin. But his criminal career really took off after he met Helena Beltracchi in 1992. They fell in love immediately. Within days, he told her that he was an art forger. He says he knew she wouldn't go to the police. "The first minute I saw my future life with her," he says. Helena became his perfect accomplice. They married about a year later, and he took her last name. Although Wolfgang was a forger, he did not copy paintings. He created totally new works of art, but in the style of the original painters. His greatest gift was the ability to look at a painting and in just a few minutes figure out exactly how the painter did it, where he started, when he added the blue, the white, the clouds, the water. He could even tell the time it took to complete the painting. Before tackling a forgery, Wolfgang would sometimes go to where the painter lived to get a feeling for the light there. He wanted to make sure of the colors, but also to pick up something more mystical, a sense of the painter's soul. It was Wolfgang who came up with the idea of creating old photographs of Helena's grandmother sitting in front of some of the family's art collection. Wolfgang used a pre-war box camera and paper. The photos actually show Helena Beltrecki herself. The paintings on the wall are black and white photocopies. Wolfgang also devised the Samlang Fleck time labels, which he fixed to the backs of paintings. To age them, he stained them with tea and coffee. The painting that brought about their downfall was a fake Campendunk called Red Picture with Horses. In 2006, they sent it to an auction house in Cologne, with the usual fake label on the back. But in 2008, the company that bought it commissioned a scientific analysis from a British expert, which showed that the painting contained traces of the pigment titanium white, which was not in general use until the 40s. Another expert then realized that the Samlang Fleck time label on the back of the painting was fake. That led to the discovery of numerous other paintings bearing the false labels, including the Max Ernst La Forêt. Wolfgang and Helena Beltrecki were arrested in Germany on August 27, 2010. Helena was released from prison in February 2013, while Wolfgang was in prison until January 2015. He agreed to paint only in his own name and to move from Germany to France. The Beltreckis say they have no regrets. Wolfgang insists he has no plans to return to forgery, although he admits it's hard. As he says, if you imagine that after breakfast you can paint a little painting that can earn you 1 million euros or 2 million euros, then it's not so easy not to do it.
(7.12) 1.
To his father's amazement, the teenage Wolfgang painted a Picasso in a couple of hours.
2.
Within days, he told her that he was an art forger.
3.
They married about a year later, and he took her last name.
4.
His greatest gift was the ability to look at a painting and in just a few minutes figure out exactly how the painter did it.
5.
Titanium white, which was not in general use until the 40s.
6.
He should be free by the end of the year.
7.13 Interview with an illustrator. Part 1.
Would you describe yourself as an illustrator or as an artist?
I think those are two overlapping categories. I'm an artist and an illustrator in the way that one might be an artist and a ceramic artist or an artist and a sculptor or something like that. So it's a department of being an artist.
When did you decide to become an illustrator?
I don't think I ever quite decided to become an illustrator. I knew I wanted to draw, and I think I knew I wanted to draw situations. I think it was, first of all, I knew that I could do pictures in magazines. And it was, I suppose, when I was about 20-something, 23, 24, when I was finding my own way of drawing, I also wanted to get a book to myself. so that I could have not only do the drawings, but tell the whole story and design the book that in the way that I wanted to.
And when did you realize that it was going to work out for you as a career?
When I was 20-something, a bit older than that, when I'd left university and art school, I thought I managed to get a book published in 1960 and written by John Yeoman, who's a friend, and he didn't know how to write a book and I didn't know how to illustrate it, but we got it published, and I thought, well, I'll try and keep on with this until I'm 30, and if it's not working out, then I'll go back to teaching. And I got to 30, but I passed 30, I didn't notice.
If a young person who was interested in becoming an illustrator, age 18, say, asked you for any advice you could give them, what would you say?
They do ask me, actually. It's very touching. They still come and say, some of them say, I'm doing it because of you, but also they ask that question. And I mean, I really don't know the answer, but it must be something about drawing and doing a lot of drawing and a lot of different kinds of drawing, because then you become completely familiar with the activity. And in a sense, that's the most important thing.
7.14 Interview with an Illustrator Part 2.
How important is the relationship between author and illustrator?
Well, in some respect, it has to be terribly important, I think. But it's the thing about it is initially it's collaboration. Very often isn't what people think it is. You don't spend a lot of time talking about, shall we do this, shall we do that? I never want to do that. Essentially, the collaboration, the relationship, is with the text to begin with the book to begin with, and you have to read that first, and you have to keep collaborating with those are the messages from the writer. That is the thing that you're dealing with. You may want to talk to the writer as well, but if you can establish the relationship with the words, that's the important thing.
Are there any authors to whom you did talk a lot?
With Roald Dahl, I think our view of things in many respects is very, very different. And I think we did talk a lot, and we needed to talk. But it was on the basis of what he'd written initially, so that the way of going about it, which we established after a while, was that I would draw some pictures of what I thought the characters looked like, and the moments that I thought would be useful to draw and interesting to draw. Then I would go and talk to him about it. And he would say, could you do this and could you do that? We need to see more tortoises, something like that. But we talked quite a lot. Again, some of it was about the technicalities of the book, getting it to work better, I think. But I think to get into the mood of the book, which is a terribly important thing, is something you have to do on your own, really, I think. The author can't tell you that, I don't think.
I can imagine that an author might ask an illustrator to redraw something. Does it ever work the other way around, that the illustrator asks the author to change things?
It can do, yes. Actually, Roald volunteered to alter things. I didn't ask him to. I mean, in the case of the BFG, which we spent a long time working on, the BFG had a different costume to begin with. He had a long leather apron and long boots and that sort of thing. Of course, if you say an apron, when the character is introduced, you say he was wearing an apron. You don't talk about it after that, probably. But I have to draw it in every wretched picture that there is in the book. So after a bit, this apron's getting in the way, isn't it? Because the chap has to, the giant has to run and has to leap in the air and so on and so on. So we went back and talked about what he would wear that would keep his character the same, but and that also what came out of that. We couldn't decide what to put on his feet, and I went home, and a day or two later arrived this strange brown paper parcel, which was one of Roald's own Norwegian sandals. And of course, it solved the problem as far as what he wears is concerned. But in a funny way, it also told you how near he was to his creation.
7.15 Interview with an Illustrator, Part 3.
Do you like all the characters you create in an illustration, or are some more interesting to you than others?
You have a sympathetic feeling for all of them, I think. But of course, some are more interesting than others, I think. That's not a question I've ever thought about, I don't think. Yes, I think some are more interesting, but I think the essence of that question, I'm not sure if I got this right, is that you have to be able to, whether they're nice or not, or interesting or not, you have to be able to identify with them, so that you imagine, in some sense, as you're drawing, that you are them. And that's much more important than whether you're interested in them or like them.
So you're not thinking of the children who are going to be reading the books?
What I'm interested in about children is children, and about children in books. But I'm not illustrating children's books because I love children, or because I have children, which I don't, or because anything of that kind. What you have to do while you're illustrating that book is to identify with them for that moment, in the same way that's how I know what they're doing, because I just become them for a moment, in the same way that you become the elderly grandparent, or you become the dog, or whatever the characters are.
Do you draw from life?
I never draw from life, no. I make it all up. I think I'm fortunate in that respect. I can imagine people. I do a rough drawing first to see how, where the gestures are, what the activity is, how the figures relate to each other, what the expressions on their faces are. So I get a rough drawing, and then I work from that. But I mostly just invented.
Do you ever draw digitally?
Digitally, curiously enough, I was probably one of the first people who did it, because I did, like 40 years ago, did drawing on a television screen. In a television studio, so that you could draw on the screen. But I haven't gone on with it. I wouldn't mind doing it. The disadvantage to it, from my point of view, is that I like the feeling of the implement on the paper. So that you get, if you have a quill or a nib or a reed pen, you get a different kind of scratch. But if you're inventing what is happening, the reed pen is actually doing it. It's not copying something out there, it's actually creating it as you're going along. So that the fact that you can feel it on the paper is enormously helpful.
Is there an artist or an illustrator that inspired you?
I was very influenced by a lot of people who were drawing when I started drawing in the 50s. Ronald Searle, for instance, who you couldn't avoid being influenced by him to a considerable extent. But the person that I think most had an effect on me was a French artist, a contemporary and friend of Searle, André François. When I was a young man, I got his address and went to see him. And then I suppose he died a few years ago. He was nearly 90. But just 2 or 3 years before that, I had an exhibition in Paris. And it was rather wonderful because he turned up. I didn't invite him, the gallery owner invited him. So it was nice to think he hadn't forgotten who I was, exactly.
7.16 Interview with an Illustrator, Looking at Language. 1.
But we got it published, and I thought, well, I'll try and keep on with this until I'm 30.
2.
And I got to 30, but I passed 30, I didn't notice.
3.
But we talked quite a lot. Again, some of it was about the technicalities of the book, getting it to work better.
4,
But I think to get into the mood of the book, which is a terribly important thing.
5,
So he's after a bit. This apron's getting in the way, isn't it?
6,
If you have a quill or a nib or a reed pen, you get a different kind of scratch.
7,
When I was a young man, I got his address and went to see him.
7.17. 1,
Is there a book that you particularly like because of the illustrations?
Garfield. I love Garfield. They have wonderful illustrations with the stupid human and the stupid dog and the clever cat. I love it. That would be it.
Do you have a favorite painting or poster in your house?
I have a painting I bought in Buenos Aires once with 2 tango dancers, which I'm very fond of. I dance tango myself, and it has a meaning to me.
Can you describe it?
Not very strong colors. It's sort of black and white, and she's wearing a red dress, which is also very classical tango-like, and he's in black clothes, and they're like from above. You see her leaning back. It's nice.
2,
Is there a book that you particularly liked or like because of the illustrations?
It is difficult, but I guess a book that I would enjoy the most because of the illustrations would be actually Tolkien's Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. He did a lot of original illustrations himself, and they're quite whimsical in their design. I really enjoy that sort of originality.
Do you have a favorite painting or poster in your house?
I have a really nice picture from Canada by a local artist, and it's inspired by the traditional Canadian styles, but it's black and red painting, very striking, and sort of a tribal style. And I really like that one. It's very vibrant and at the same time simple.
3,
Can you remember a book you read when you were a child where you liked the illustrations?
Probably The Little Prince, because the author illustrated the book himself, and he's got watercolor illustrations, and they're so unique and timeless.
Do you have a favorite painting or poster in your house?
I have a calendar that my friend made, so it's got pictures of all of us, which is really nice.
4,
Is there a book that you particularly like because of the illustrations?
There's probably 2 books that I can think of that I liked because of the illustrations. One is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, which had all the very famous line drawings in the book of Alice going down into Wonderland, following the White Rabbit. And I guess I really liked those because they kind of show you the characters and they help you to kind of fix the images of the people within the book. So I really liked that one. And another one that I liked, and I don't know if they were the original illustrations that come with the book, were Oscar Wilde's short stories. And I always remember there was a picture of the selfish giant crying in the garden. And I think I read that as a child, so it must have really stuck with me that I can still see this image. And again, I think it was just a black and white line drawing.
Do you have a favorite painting or poster in your house? Can you describe it?
Okay, I do have a favorite painting in my house at the moment. I actually got it for Christmas. And it was actually in my friend's bedroom, and I saw it and I said, oh, that's really nice. And she said, oh, okay, well, you can have it for your Christmas present. And I have it hanging up in my house at the moment, and it's 2 birds in a garden about to eat a plant. And it's very cute. It's not realistic. And I just really like it. It's kind of a tree, and underneath it said something like, we found love, which is probably sentimental. But anyway, it was quite sweet and I really liked it, and it's in my house at the moment.
5,
Is there a book that you particularly like because of the illustrations?
When I was younger, I had this copy of The Little Princess, which had really beautiful illustrations, and I really loved it.
Do you have a favorite painting or poster in your house? Can you describe it?
At my parents' house, in my room, I have this poster that I got when we went to Pompeii when I was in 5th grade. It's a recreation of this Roman mural, and so it's this lady with flowers, and it's beautiful.
7.18. 1.
I have a painting I bought in Buenos Aires once with 2 tango dancers, which I'm very fond of.
2.
It's very vibrant and at the same time simple.
3.
And he's got watercolor illustrations, and they're so unique and timeless.
4.
I think I read that as a child, so it must have really stuck with me.
5.
It's a recreation of this Roman mural.
8.1. 1.
I'm not sure if I've ever had experience with what you would call alternative medicine. I've used chiropractic, but not everyone considers chiropractic to be alternative. I had been doing some sort of extreme exercises in the gym, and I got a slipped disc, and the pain was excruciating. And although my boyfriend at the time was an orthopedic surgeon, he told me to see a chiropractor, and I must say, it worked really well. The only problem was that although I felt fine after, I think, 3 or 4 visits, the chiropractor wanted me to keep coming back, and so I ended up having to make an excuse for not going back. I said that I was leaving the country, basically, but it worked.
2.
I'm very skeptical, about alternative medicine. All sorts of alternative medicine, in fact, I don't believe in them. Except, I guess, osteopathy. If you can call that alternative. But the only time I've had something that you would really call alternative medicine was when I went to an osteopath because I had a bad back. And at the same time as having a bad back, I had this really awful cold, terrible pain in my sinuses, and I could hardly breathe, and the osteopath said, I can give you a sort of acupuncture, but it's with very small needles that they put in your ear. And I was lying face down having the osteopath deal with my back, and I could hardly breathe, so I said, okay. So he put these tiny needles in my ear, and I have to admit that the next day I was almost completely better. I felt so good, and it convinced me, really, that, in the sense that it definitely wasn't a placebo effect because I didn't believe in it, but I really felt much, much better.
3.
I don't use alternative medicine because I think it's a waste of time and it doesn't work. If alternative medicine worked, it wouldn't be alternative. It would be actual conventional medicine. The reason that it's alternative is because we don't have any solid proof that it works. You only ever hear anecdotal evidence that it's worked for individual people. That's not real evidence. And I would say to anyone who's heard stories like that, look up the placebo effect. There's no evidence that alternative medicine works beyond the placebo effect. And so as far as I'm concerned, it's a waste of time and money. And at its worst, it could even be dangerous or harmful if people are using it in place of real medicine that might cure their very real illness.
4.
So, having had endless pain as a result of this inflamed tendon in my foot, and after tons of antibiotics that seemed to take a very long time to have any effect, I decided to try acupuncture. It just so happened that the doctor who was doing it was somebody that I'd known from the doctor's group where I used to go to, so I went to him, and it was an extremely pleasant experience. But unfortunately, it didn't do any good at all. However, if I was very sick or something and had tried all sorts of normal cures, I think I'd give it a try again.
8.2. Plus infinitive.
Afford.
Agree.
Happen.
Manage.
Pretend.
Refuse.
Tend.
threaten,
plus gerund.
Avoid.
can't help,
Can't stand.
deny,
Imagine.
involve,
Be worth.
look forward to,
Miss.
practice,
Regret.
risk,
Suggest.
Plus base form.
had better,
Would rather.
8.3.
Think about your average day as a series of choices. You get up, you choose what to eat, you decide whether to go for a run, whether or not to have a second helping of dessert. You're constantly making decisions based on what you want versus what you think is good for you. But how do you know what's good for you? Nowadays, we are bombarded with research and statistics telling us what we should or shouldn't do. But are the numbers really right? First of all, the classic advice to eat 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Does it really make a difference? Well, it's a lot more useful than just saying, eat a varied diet, because how do we know what that really means? But 5 servings may not be enough. A World Health Organization study found that in the countries with the lowest levels of heart disease, the average person was eating around 10 servings a day of fruit and veggies. So although 5 will do you good, more might be better. In the U.S., by the way, only 1 in 10 adults eat enough fruit and vegetables each day. From food to water. The claim that we should drink 8 glasses of water a day is widely attributed to a report by the American National Academy of Sciences, which estimated that we needed 2.5 liters of fluid a day, which is approximately 8 glasses. But, and this is the key thing, the fluid doesn't need to be water. For example, we already take in 3/4 of a liter of fluid from the food we eat each day. The 8 glasses of water idea might seem fairly harmless, but it has created a belief that we don't drink enough water. In fact, the best advice is, if you're thirsty, have a drink. Water, tea, juice, whatever you feel like. If not, you're probably fine. Now, the tricky question of how much we should eat, or more specifically, how many calories a day we should consume. The standard guidelines are 2,000 calories a day for women and 2,500 for men. But this is a simplification. The actual amount you need depends on your weight and height, the amount of activity you do, and your metabolism. Some people can eat like a horse and not put on weight. Every individual is different and needs to balance their own food intake against their own calorie needs. What about sleep? Well, for everyone who tells you that they can get by on 4 hours a night, studies show that most people need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep to function well. If you regularly average less than 7 hours, then you have an increased risk of depression, diabetes, and heart problems. But sleeping for more than 9 hours a night has also been associated with an increase in health issues. So 8 hours a night is probably about right, though a little more or a little less shouldn't do you any harm. On to exercise. You've probably heard that the recommended amount of exercise is a minimum of half an hour's moderate activity 5 times a week. But even if you're doing the recommended amount, it may not be enough if you then drive to work and sit at a computer all day. A review by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition said that an average of 30 minutes daily may not prevent unhealthy weight gain in many people. The message? Do the recommended amount of moderate activity, but try to do more if you can, especially if you spend a lot of the day sitting down. And finally, we all know how addicted our kids are to anything with a screen. But given the amount of panic there is about children watching TV, playing computer games, or going online, there is surprisingly little research into the long-term effects of screen time. So, should we limit screen time to protect our children's physical or emotional health? It's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, sitting down for too long is as bad for children as it is for adults. But a large-scale UK study of 11,000 children showed no relationship between screen time and emotional or social problems or an inability to concentrate or make friends. So while the internet may be changing how our brains work, the idea of limiting screen time to 2 hours a day isn't supported by research. Instead, we should make up our own minds about what's best for our children and for ourselves.
.4 1.
You're constantly making decisions based on what you want versus what you think is good for you.
2.
Does it really make a difference?
3.
So although 5 will do you good, more might be better.
4.
So 8 hours a night is probably about right, though a little more or a little less shouldn't do you any harm.
5.
Do the recommended amount of moderate activity, but try to do more if you can, especially if you spend a lot of the day sitting down.
6.
But a large-scale UK study of 11,000 children showed no relationship between screen time and emotional or social problems or an inability to concentrate or make friends.
7.
Instead, we should make up our own minds about what's best for our children and for ourselves.
8.5 1.
My husband's as stubborn as a mule. He refuses to go to the doctor about his bad back.
2.
She's as white as a sheet. I think she's going to faint.
3.
He sings like an angel. He really should be on a singing competition show.
4.
He's as deaf as a post. You'll have to speak up a little.
5.
She sleeps like a log. I don't think she's ever had problems with insomnia.
6.
Your mother's as blind as a bat. She should get her eyes tested.
7.
She's been as good as gold. She took all her medicine without making any fuss.
8.
He's lost a lot of weight since his illness. He's as thin as a rail.
9.
When I pressed the button, the nurse came as quick as a flash and changed my IV drip.
10.
My new medication works like a dream. I feel 100 times better.
8.6
My husband's as stubborn as a mule. He refuses to go to the doctor about his bad back.
8.7 Travel and tourism. Verbs and verb phrases. 1.
Set off on a journey.
2.
Extend a trip.
3.
Go camping.
4.
Go on vacation.
5.
Cancel a trip.
6.
Postpone a trip.
7.
Wander around the old town.
8.
Chill out after a tiring day.
9.
Soak up the atmosphere.
10.
Sample the local cuisine.
11,
Hit the stores.
12,
Get away from it all.
13,
Recharge your batteries.
8.8. Describing places. 1,
I think that restaurant's overrated.
2,
The museum's pretty dull, but the cafe's good.
3,
The stores are very touristy, but we bought some nice things.
4,
The oceanfront has been spoiled by all the new hotels.
5,
It's a really lively area at night.
6,
We found a great coffee shop on a side street in Los Angeles off the beaten track.
7,
The hotel pool is always overcrowded.
8,
The view is absolutely breathtaking.
9,
We went to a very picturesque little fishing village yesterday.
10,
The souvenirs were all plastic Eiffel towers and key rings, really tacky stuff.
11,
The side of the temple is extremely remote. You can only get there on foot, and it takes 4 hours.
12,
It's a lovely city, almost completely unspoiled by tourism.
8.9.
I was travelling back from Spain to the UK. I was with my family, I was with my wife and 2 young children. It was 2 days before Christmas, and we were travelling back to London to visit my family there. It was an evening flight. I think the flight left around 10 o'clock, and it was leaving from Valencia. The weather there was really good, but just before we were going to take off, I was just reading the messages the last minute, and I saw there was a message from my brother. So I read it, and he was asking me whether the flight had been cancelled, because he said in the message that there was a very, very bad storm in London with gale force winds. I sent a message back to him saying, well, no, actually, we're just taking off. But obviously it made me wonder what the weather was going to be like when we got there.
8.10.
It was a 2-hour flight. Everything was normal until we got to Gatwick. As we were approaching Gatwick, the pilot came on and he said, I'm sorry, we can't land yet because there's really bad weather here, so we're going to circle for a while. So the plane started circling, and then we started getting the worst turbulence I've ever experienced. The plane just seemed to be going up in the air, then dropping, then rising up again, and then dropping. This went on for about 20 minutes. Then the pilot obviously decided he was going to have a go at landing. But as he got nearer and nearer to the ground, the wind just got stronger and stronger, and the plane was being knocked around. And I really thought, this is it, we're going to crash.
8.11.
Just at the very last moment, the pilot obviously realised that it was impossible to land, and he changed his mind, and the plane suddenly shot back up in the air, and this was a really scary moment. And a lot of people on the plane, they sort of gasped in alarm. The plane started gaining height. The pilot didn't say anything. And when we finally got up, really high again, then he came on and he said, I'm very sorry, but I just couldn't land. It was too windy. And I'm afraid we can't land at Gatwick now because the airport's been closed. In fact, I have to tell you that we can't land anywhere in the UK because all the airports are closed. Everyone on the plane was sort of looking at each other. I think we were all thinking, so where are we going to land? Have we got enough petrol to land somewhere else?
8.12.
Well, then the pilot said, fortunately, Amsterdam Airport has said we can land there. So we're off to Holland now. Then we had a 2-hour journey to Holland. That was okay, fairly calm, fairly normal. And then as we came into land at Amsterdam, the pilot warned us. He said, it's going to be windy here too, but not as bad as at Gatwick. And it was quite a good landing, a little bit bumpy, and everyone was very, very relieved to get down on the ground. In fact, all the passengers applauded. We all started getting up. To be honest, we couldn't wait, to get off and get our feet on firm ground again.
8.13.
But then, just as we were getting all our things from the overhead locker, one of the cabin crew got on the loudspeaker and he said, well, no, don't get off, because what's happening now is we're going to refuel and then we're going to fly back to Gatwick. We're going to have another try because we think that in a couple of hours the weather should be better at Gatwick. And he said, if you want to get off, you can get off, but there won't be a hotel for you because this plane's going back to Gatwick.
8.14.
So then everyone had a bit of a dilemma. And in fact, what happened was that pretty well everyone who had children, all the parents, there are a lot of children on the plane because it was Christmas, pretty well everyone who had children got off the plane and the others stayed on. We were really happy to get off that plane and we spent the night in Amsterdam airport. And then in the morning, we got a train from Amsterdam to Belgium. In Brussels, we picked up the Eurostar and that took us through France, under the Channel and back to London. So after travelling all day, we finally got home around 7 o'clock in the evening, just in time for the children to hang up their stockings for Christmas. Definitely the most frightening experience I've ever had.
8.15. The history of penicillin.
I'm Nigel, and this is St Mary's Hospital in London. Humanity has always fought against disease and infection. But it wasn't until the 19th century that people began to understand the role bacteria and other germs had to play. This led to rapid improvements in hygiene, and for the first time, people could prevent infection. But it wasn't until 1928 that Alexander Fleming found a way to treat infection when he discovered penicillin here at St Mary's Hospital.
Alexander Fleming was a Scottish doctor and scientist. He was born in 1881 and began research here in 1906. Fleming was a brilliant researcher, but he was notoriously messy. After a month's holiday, he returned to find a mold growing on a bacteria sample he had discarded. As he was throwing it away, he noticed the mold was actually killing the bacteria. When he investigated further, he found the type of mold was penicillium. Fleming named the substance it released penicillin.
Fleming realized that penicillin could treat infection, but he couldn't produce enough of the antibiotic agent to be truly effective. It looked like the end of the road for penicillin until two Oxford scientists took up the challenge.
Howard Florey was an Australian pharmacologist and pathologist working at Oxford University. He led a team researching antibacterial agents produced by microorganisms. Ernst Boris Chain had fled Nazi Germany to work as a scientist in England. He was one of Florey's most talented colleagues and was studying naturally occurring chemicals that could kill bacteria. Together, they started looking into Fleming's discovery and decided they had better reinvestigate some of his findings. Based here at Lincoln College, an entire team of Oxford-based scientists were soon working on penicillin, and by late 1940, they had invented a way to mass-produce the drug. They had also trialed the drug here at Oxford's Radcliffe Infirmary. By this time, another war, World War II, had started. Suddenly, there was a great need for a drug which could fight infection, and the American War Production Board was willing to spend big money. By 1945, they were able to produce enough penicillin to treat the entire Allied forces. That same year, Fleming, Florey, and Chain won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, and penicillin was being hailed as a wonder drug.
Penicillin was the first antibiotic, a range of drugs used to treat and prevent infections. There are now more than 100 antibiotics, which can treat all kinds of illnesses, from mild conditions like acne to serious infections like meningitis. For over 70 years, they have saved countless lives, but scientists warn we are now facing a new threat: antibiotic resistance.
Bacteria are living organisms, and like any living thing, they adapt to survive. Many strains of bacteria have evolved to fight off antibiotics, and this means some infections are now resistant to treatment. Although some of this resistance is naturally occurring, much of it is our own fault. Antibiotics have become far too widely used, meaning that many strains of bacteria have been overexposed to these drugs and as a consequence have developed resistance.
There are several reasons for this, but one of the most damaging is overprescription. Some doctors have used antibiotics as a cure-all treatment, prescribing them for minor illnesses. As a result, many patients now demand them, regardless of what they're suffering from or how effective the drugs will be. In some countries, antibiotics are even available over the counter, so there are almost no restrictions on how they're supplied.
This overuse of antibiotics has fueled the rapid growth of resistance, and if it continues, it will have disastrous consequences. Suddenly, illnesses we regard as minor could be deadly, and most major surgery, such as heart operations or cancer treatment, will be impossible to carry out because the risk of untreatable infection will be too high. But if we can control our use of antibiotics, we can limit the spread of resistance. Global legislation is required to restrict the oversupply of antibiotics, and we all, doctors and patients, need to make sure we use the drug sparingly and responsibly.
But while we can certainly slow down the development of antibiotic resistance, we will never stop it entirely. That is why scientists are urgently trying to discover new forms of antibiotic that bacteria may not yet be resistant to. The issue is now so serious that if this can be achieved, it will be the most important antibacterial breakthrough since Fleming's discovery of penicillin.
End of CD4.